See if we're streaming. Might be streaming. See if we're streaming. Let's give it a little check-see. See what we get. Oh, we are live. We are live. All right. Wait a couple of minutes. See if anybody's going to come in to our lovely Sunday evening chat, because nobody's doing anything on a Sunday evening. But it is about 3 o'clock, though, for you West Coast peeps. So could have been worse. Could have done this thing live at about 10 o'clock tonight. So I know what you're thinking, right? This is such a cool setup behind me. And if you're not, I am. So just bear with me. A little bit of a wow factor. I've had this green screen here for probably the past year, but finally took it out. If you hear any of my animals in the background, I'm sorry. We've got many of them, so they tend to meow, woof, the whole 9 yards. Whew. So, where do we start? Let's get that little hair out of my face. All right, guys, so number one, first and foremost, welcome. My name is Josh Winton. YouTube handle is IAQJosh, so I assume most of you are going to be watching in live on this YouTube stream. So posted up some social links here to Facebook, as well as I think we had one on LinkedIn as well. And bear with me while I let this cat out of here. Come on, cat. Come on. I'm trying to be live and professional here. Come on. Come on. Come on. There we go. And I'm back. All right, so let's start this puppy over. Hey guys, what's going on? Moisture mapping. So this is an extremely fun topic for me. As you can see here in the backdrop, I've got a large life-size moisture map. This is actually one that the folks at my remediation company use. They use this as well as pretty much many other folks within the mold remediation space, water damage space, bio cleanup, any of the above. Anytime you need to document some level of an environmental issue within a structure, something as beautiful and easy to use as a floor plan is going to be your best friend. So some of you out there already use something like this. So if you do, I'm not telling you mine's better. I'm not telling you you shouldn't use it. You might have a better one than me, but what I am telling you is anybody who is not already using something like what you see in the background here, which is going to be a moisture map. It's also part of the moisture mapping process. This is key, right? So this is key on so many levels. On your local levels, i.e. you get a call from Mrs. Jones. You go on out, you're going to be handling Mrs. Jones' flood that she had. Dishwasher backed up, pipe burst, water went all throughout the house, right? Let's say this is Mrs. Jones' background here, right? So we've got the kitchen up in the left-hand corner, or right-hand corner, I don't know which way I am, it's all backwards here. Then you've got a bathroom up in this corner. You've got your primary bedroom closet, and then you've got your primary bedroom somewhere around here, right? So this is a condominium that my team created a floor plan from. Those of you who have been following me for long enough know that I'm a big Magic Plan fan, so I'm not telling you that you should go right now and buy Magic Plan, but definitely check out Magic Plan. Super wonderful program. I think the website URL is magicplan.app. This is something that is super easy to use. You can run out, you can draw floor plans using your camera, you can use your Leica measurement devices. There's a whole bunch of bells and whistles within the program, but if you already have something like Xactimate and you can create floor plans or some other platform for developing floor plans, then of course probably don't need it, but nonetheless definitely something cool to check out. Now, back to the topic at hand, moisture mapping. Something like this, where we've got in the upper corner, we've got a moisture assessment. This is what we have always called it. Now, this isn't to say you need to call it that. This is something that is just referring to what we're dealing with, which is going to be moisture assessment. You'll notice that I have a date on there. I like to document the moisture meters that I'm using. So for the most part, I'm a Tramex guy, also a Delmhurst guy. You're going to commonly see those two names right up in this region. Then on the left-hand side or right-hand side, we call our projects, or we group our projects, I should say, by the project ID. Also like to list the technicians that are on the project, and then of course the area or the name. Now, if this wasn't Mrs. Jones' home and I was doing something like a school or a major campus, what we would probably do is we would have this broken down by classrooms. So rather than it saying, unit 873, which refers to this entire property, we'd probably call it something like gymnasium or auditorium or cafeteria. Now, when it comes to the moisture maps and how they are used, this is one example of that. Simply put, I've got a template here that has this big blank white spot here where it's just as simple as me taking a floor plan and dropping it into this place. Now you're going to also notice that I have a lot of colors once I get on the right side here. These colors, which once we get to the bottom of this background I'll be able to show you, these colors are going to show in a nutshell what our drying progress looks like, right? So not only do we collect the objective data, which is going to be our actual moisture reading, whether it's 27%, whether it's 57%, but I like to group them by, what would you call it, percentages or ranges, right? So let's say anything under 20% moisture content might be considered dry. Anything from 20 to 40%, we would give that a yellow, saying that, hey, there's still some moisture, but it's not ridiculous, but definitely we need to continue drying this. Then once we get above that 40%, we're into the orange, above the 70%, now we're in the red. So it doesn't really matter what color scales you use, but you should be using something that is not only easy for your team to be working with and properly documenting, but also think of your clients, right? And not only thinking of your clients, but thinking of the insurance adjusters that are involved. Maybe there's a property manager involved. I can't think of an easier way to tell everyone what is going on and what the project status is than by giving them this beautiful floor plan, which of course is representative of the property that you're working in, and saying, hey, here's our wettest areas, the red areas. Here's our driest areas, the green areas. Everything in between is getting closer and closer to what we refer to as the dry standard. We set drying goals at the beginning of the project. So if I got too far ahead, let's jump back and say, why do we need a moisture map? We know what a moisture map is. We know this is exactly what one version of a moisture map would look like. In my case, I like to do things visual. I've got great influences around me, individuals that own assessment companies, individuals that own remediation companies, and everything in between. And through these different outlets and channels that I have, I absorb a lot, and then I say, okay, what is the easiest for me to actually look at and get a better idea of how things are going, how things are drying, things that need attention, etc. And I go, I like pictures. If everything could be in a picture book for Mr. Josh here, life would be wonderful. So effectively, I take that, I adopt that methodology, and case in point, here we have it. Now, who could actually benefit from using a moisture map? Mold remediation contractors, assessment contractors, maybe even a general contractor if you're handling any of the mitigation or drying processes. Could be an HVAC company, could be a company like Stanley Steamer, a carpet cleaning company that also offers drying or mitigation services. So there are so many individuals out there that could benefit from something like this. Even if you're not working in the emergency water restoration field, you can use this to designate an area that has mold, an area that has high levels of VOC concentrations. Maybe this is a wall that's damaged that needs repairs. The sky's the limit, but for the purposes in which I use it, in my specific use case, we use it to document areas that have water damage, that have suspect microbial growth, because until we test it, we don't know if it's mold. We document other parameters like visible damages. Maybe an area is not wet, but it clearly looks like there was some previous damage, whether it's from this event that recently happened or whether it's from an event in the past. Nonetheless, what I need to do for my specific use case is I need to document all of these parameters. So now, getting into where this could benefit specific people, let's take remediation contractors for an example. Let's go back to the use case where we're working at Jane Doe's house. Jane Doe called you, she's got that dishwasher leak. You go out, your team is extracting all of the water, you got everything up now off the floor. The emergency service side of it, so to speak, is is subsided a bit. Maybe everyone's kind of a little bit calmer now because, hey, after all, we're not splashing around in water. So now this is typically when you would have someone, whether it's a project manager, whether it's a lead technician, just somebody who is familiar with using something like an iPad. We've progressed above pen and paper here. You could do this on pen and paper. I don't advise it, but somebody would walk through the property. In my case, I would walk through with an infrared imaging camera, right? My FLIR camera. Everyone sees the medley of FLIR tools that I have. And I'm looking for thermal anomalies. Thermal anomalies, if you don't know, there'll be another video at a later date, but those are just things that don't look like the rest. So if I've got a big red spot and then I've got a blue spot, to me that's something I want to check for moisture. In addition for checking for thermal anomalies, I'm using my moisture meters, both penetrating and non-penetrating depending on what I need, as these are going to give me the actual moisture concentration value that's within this wallboard, whether it's plaster, whether it's a tiled wall and we're checking the grout lines, whether it's a concrete wall. Every tool has its use. We're also going to be using tools such as a thermal hygrometer to collect the ambient environmental conditions. I want to know what the temperature is. I want to know what the humidity is. Having both of these parameters, I can now calculate the GPP, which is our grains per pound. I can also calculate the dew point. Now, fortunately, if you're like me, you have a multifunction thermal hygrometer out there that can pretty much display all of these things on one screen, which of course makes my life easier. But nonetheless, these are what I'm looking at when I go out and am walking through a property to document these findings. Now, you may be saying, okay, Josh, that's great, but you're a mold assessment contractor or an environmental consultant, not a restoration guy, even though, of course, we all know you've got a restoration background. Doesn't matter, and here's why. In order to know if you are actually drying, you need to know what your environmental conditions are. You need to know what your moisture concentration levels are. These are things that we monitor daily. These are things that the insurance adjuster is going to want you to provide at the end if you want to get paid. So do yourself your due diligence and make sure that you've got some level of competent documentation. Could be something like this, could be pen and paper. Quite frankly, I don't care how it's done. I just want to see the industry evolve and this trade get better and better and better, and ultimately, of course, be taken more seriously in some regards. Now, as a remediation contractor, documenting these findings day in and day out, you're going to see we've got, once I figure out which side of the wall I'm on, I don't know how these weathermen do this, right? We've got a warm front, cold front coming in. But anyway, you're going to see over here through the course of a 3 to 5 day period, depending on your drying times. I mean, they can vary. You can have things dry overnight. It might take you 7, 8 days to get things dry. But you're going to start to see a lot of these reds will turn to oranges, will turn to yellows, will turn to greens. So this is great from the viewpoint of the remediation contractor because then you can now provide this to Jane Doe daily, bi-daily, whatever you want, just to show her and her family, hey, this is how everything is drying. So you can see that we're doing our job. Obviously, you see us here day in and day out. You're probably wondering what we're doing, but of course don't want to disturb us, and that's fine. So I'm doing my due diligence and my onus, which is providing you with the supporting documentation that accompanies the work that I'm doing. Now here's where it's also co-beneficial. When the insurance adjuster reaches out and asks you to send over your drying logs, we've all heard that term, drying logs, you can send this over. This is wonderful. This is the only downfall I can think of is if you are one of the contractors out there in this world that like to give an insurance carrier 365-page documents for even little floods and water damages and things of that sort. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just telling you, this isn't that. What this is this gets to the meat and potatoes section of those reports quickly. This puts in front of them something that everyone can understand, from a second grader all the way up to a individual in their senior years of life, right? This is visual representative documentation of the progress. So now on the assessment side, same sort of ballgame, right? There are folks like myself, and there's many more out there, that professionally moisture map for remediation companies, restoration contractors, right? So the current company that I'm working for, which many of you out there that do follow me know, I am working for a national company, working within their large loss division, right? And this is exactly what we do day in and day out. So many of the personnel at this company. But this isn't a sales pitch for that company. That's why we're going to conveniently leave the company name out. But again, we do this as a profession on the regular for remediation contractors. And you might be saying, okay, well, if you just told me I can do this as a remediation contractor, then why would I want to hire a third-party company to do it? Third party. There you go. Removing yourself from the equation, because after all, you are going to still be documenting this on your own. You have to. Otherwise, you're not going to know what equipment can come out what days, what equipment can move from here to there. You still have to be tracking these metrics and logging this documentation day in and day out on your end. But what this does is this removes you from the equation, right? This makes it a little more objective, a little less bias involved, where you've got a third-party company now coming in and effectively overseeing the project at hand. Now, of course, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that on, case in point, the small Jane Doe water event that happened, as that's relatively small scale, and that's probably something that you and your personnel can handle in-house. But let's say if you had a 20-unit water event that happened, sprinkler line bursted on the 18th floor and came down, and we've affected all these units, that's probably a pretty good time where, unless you've got a large enough company that's cross-trained in this moisture identification process, as well as have enough pieces of thermal imaging equipment, moisture meters, thermohygrometers to deploy company-wide. If you are one of the fortunate few out there, then great, absolutely do it yourself. I'm not telling you to change anything there, but there's definitely a need out there for competent assessment contractors that can assist the remediation folks, because after all, these are the folks that are just running around executing all of the labor, right? These are the ones carrying 2 air movers up 15 flights of stairs because there's no power, because the elevator went down because there's no power, and they're having to carry all of this up. So from the assessment standpoint, this can be beneficial, because even if you're not offering this type of service that I am, you may say, hey, if I'm going out and I'm performing, let's call it a mold assessment report, right? As a mold assessor, we also need to document our moisture findings, because after all, typically speaking, you don't find mold and fungi without an actual moisture source. So therefore, coming out and having a presentation such as this, which it could just be a snippet of this that's copy and pasted into your report, could be very helpful to the end users that would be reading this report. That's going to be Mrs. Jones, the client. That might be an insurance carrier, but ultimately, you better believe there's going to be a remediation professional, i.e. a mold remediator, who's going to be reading through your report, and the easier that we can make it for these individuals to interpret, the better. My perspective on it is you should be able to give your report to a field technician for any construction or remediation company out there, and they should understand at least 80 to 90% of the report. Of course, once we start getting into the spore talks and the hyphal fragments and things like that, of course, that's not their subject matter. I don't expect them to know it, but this is something that everyone can relate to. This is something that should be in every report. Now, let me go ahead and scroll on down here. Bear with me as I click through some things and drag some things, and I don't have fancy technology. So let's try to get out of the way. You know what? Let's start in this section. All right. So moving along on this example moisture mapping diagram that I have, you're going to have your dry standards. Dry standards are going to be very important. We know this as any individual within the environmental industry. Unless you know what your dry standards are, which are going to be your non-impacted, non-moisture affected materials, we're kind of guessing on when we would be dry. So we have to document our dry standards. In this case, we would have 20 on the drywall, which we collected. Our tile is going to be 40, and then our wooden materials here are going to be 10. So this is great, because we know when we come in and day out, our goal is to bring all of these moisture content readings down here up to, or excuse me, I should say down to these moisture concentration levels. So on the opposite side here, there we go, We've got our ambient readings, right? This is where we're going to be using our thermohygrometer to collect. In this case, we've got temperature, relative humidity, and then our GPP, which is going to be our grains per pound. Now, anyone out there who's a drying expert, I for one will admit it. I'm not a drying expert. I know a lot about it, but I need to because I consider myself to be very good within the mold-related services industry. Moisture leads to mold. We have to understand this before we can be good at that. So, looking at our ambient readings, we do know as professionals that if we start with something, let's say around 57 GPP, with the next day we come in, it should go down. Next day we come in, it should continue to go down. Now, we do have variables. If we live in Florida and our outside GPP is about 130 to 150 a day, which it has been for the past couple of days, then we know there's going to be influence there if we have a leaky house. So that is also the importance of collecting your outdoor environmental conditions. So this is something that I've always documented in the form of a picture. I don't necessarily put it on this diagram. You very well could. You can create A8 and just call that outdoor reading if you'd like. But documenting these factors are going to be super helpful because what it's going to do is it's going to lay everything out. Mr. Adjuster, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Property Manager, here's where everything looked on day one. I've got red everywhere. Here was how much moisture you had in the air. This area was not conducive to drying. We did not have good drying conditions. So we put in all of this equipment. We moved the air around in a circular pattern. We came in the next day. We checked our readings. We knew they were going to work, right? Because we've used fancy apps out there like the DeWalt app and other apps that are out there. Little plug there for DeWalt. But we do have tons of applications that can help us as professionals. This video isn't for that, but if you need help finding those, let me know. Happy to help. But we pre-calculate all these things, right? So in theory, assuming the platform that we're using and the calculations that we're doing are correct, we should walk in the next day like we did, and now we've got excellent drying conditions. Our grains went from 105 inside of this living room down to 80, right? And they're going to continue to go down. This is great because we're laying this information out right in front of the clients, and then we have all of this documentation. So even if all these things get lost in translation because Mrs. Jones was in disarray, she doesn't remember having that conversation with Josh, well, Mrs. Jones, you will remember the documentation that I sent over to you. Clearly direct yourself to page 2, page 3, page 4, and you're going to see this thing got drier and drier and drier, and we've got all of these images that go along with it, and it's just like, pay my bill. Pay my bill. I'm done. I did my job. Here's the documentation to prove it. But let's continue on here because clearly we're going down this rabbit hole that we always go through. That is not the button I'm looking for. There we go. All right. So, going too far here. All right, so check it out. Now we get into this section here, which is going to be our moisture content readings. As you may or may not have seen above, well, as you'll see right here, come on, right there. So we've got numbers. And these numbers here, scrolling back on up, you're going to see we will actually have, there you go. So we've got numbers here inside of these varying rooms. So up here, number 13. If we scroll on down, our number 13, as you are going to see, so our number 13, which is this way, relates to a material that is drywall, hence the DW. We've got a material key up here for all of our end users to reference. We know that it is drywall. We know that our height is about 7 feet, and we know that our moisture concentration is about 99. So again, what this is super helpful for doing, putting yourself in the remediation contractor's shoes, is let's say I was out there yesterday. I took my readings. I set up all the equipment. Everything's good. I made all my marks. Everything's great. But I leave and tomorrow Tony's coming in. Tony's not bad, but Tony's not me. Here's the cool thing. Doesn't matter if you're Tony, doesn't matter if you're Josh, doesn't matter if you're Sheila or Jason. No matter who comes in has a quick reference in the form of a moisture map that's going to be left on site that they know exactly where to walk and check for the moisture concentration reading. Now you may be asking yourself, that's great, Josh, but how do I know if it's right here or here or here or here? Do yourself a favor. There's a million different ways to do it. You could put a little sticker. You could put a piece of tape. You could put a Post-it note. If you really don't care, you can use a carpenter's pencil and write 14 with a circle on the wall, and then that individual, Tony in this case, will know exactly where to collect the moisture concentration reading to go ahead and update this map. So what this also does is this also takes things out of the technician's head. Now it takes things out of the technician's head where, as a technician, I know where I took my readings, but if I'm not here the next day, doesn't matter which technician. If we're old enough, we remember the game Lemmings, right? Every single lemming was the same. They came in, they did it, but like once that lemming left, you had another lemming come in from behind. Now what the relevance of that was, I don't know, but the moral of this story is no matter who comes on site to one of your projects, we can make sure that they are going to be collecting the reading within the, even if it's not exact, it's going to be close enough to where that moisture meter went on here and maybe went a tick over or a tick over, but it just depends on how fancy you want to get with documentation on the walls. But with something like this, where any individual can walk in and know exactly where this reading was collected, this is phenomenal. This is absolutely phenomenal. This is something that so many programs out there could value from having added to them. There's probably programs that are already incorporating these things, but nonetheless, I didn't invent all of this stuff. I've just acquired different tidbits of information from the amazing people that have been in my circle that I've worked with over the years, and we just go ahead and we document these things right here. Now, if I step out of the way here, what we're also going to notice is the color scale that I mentioned to you. In this case, my very wet materials are going to be 71 to 100%. And now, honesty card, I made a goof up. You guys might not catch it, but I did. In reality, since I'm using the relative scale, these would not be percentages. And I've told myself about 100 million times that I need to remove this little percentage, so maybe now that I've aired out the dirty laundry on YouTube, I'll actually be motivated to remove it. But let's look at it from the viewpoint of what we're showing you, which is these very wet materials are going to be 71 to 100. Then we go a step down, we've got 41 to 70, step down, 20 to 40, and then our green is going to be below our drying goal. So just like we said, up in this area, we've got our dry standard. So in this case, whenever I have a material or a wall that is that is a drywall wall and it is below 20%, I know that I've met my drying goals. So in this case, I would go ahead and I would highlight that green up here on my map. So this, again, something like this is just so simple. It takes the guesswork out of things. You're probably looking at this thinking that there can already be things that are done differently, better. You might be looking at this just saying, okay, well, this is great. I have nothing. I need to incorporate this tomorrow. And if you are one of those individuals, or you've just got something that's just kind of worked, but you want to really step your game up, there is going to be a link in the description below. I will ask you, if you have not already hit that like button, assuming you found value in this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. Do feel free to share this, as I am an advocate for information. For those of you that know me, you know that my motivation is not monetary when it comes to the education side of things. I want to share the wealth of information that I have, and also as I grow and acquire further and further knowledge of subject matter, I want to continue to share that with not only professionals, but also consumers. So again, if you haven't hit that like button, please go ahead and hit that like button. Also, subscribe. It'd be great to have you tune in on all my videos. If this is something you are interested in, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you receive notifications. Other than that, in the description below, there is going to be a link to a folder. It's going to be nextcloud.joshuawinton something something something. If you click and follow that link, promise it's not a virus, and if you have a Mac, it doesn't matter what you click anyway, that is going to take you to a folder which is going to contain 4 files. There's going to be 3 different versions of this map that you're looking at here that I just presented to you. All three of them are slightly different. Some of them have different indications on them. Some of them have the psychometrics, which is going to be our thermal hygrometer readings in a different area of the map. They're all three going to have the same color codes, if I'm not mistaken. But, if you would like to customize this and truly make it your own, I'm also including the Word document file, which an individual in this industry was kind enough to pass along to me once upon a time, and that's how these maps came about. So I'd love to take credit for the overall template of this, but not my work. As you see it here, this is my work. This is my blood, sweat, and tears that I put into this. So Word documents in there, 3 different variations of the PDF if you just want to get started tomorrow. If you guys need anything else that I was not kind enough to share or go over in this video, please feel free to reach out. If you reach out to me within this next week or two, you probably know, or you need to know, because I am in the emergency services department, we'll call it, of the company that I'm with, I am probably going to be inundated with all of the storm happenings that are going to be going on. So we still don't know what's going on with that hurricane out there, but depending on where it hits, it almost doesn't matter. We've got a lot of restoration contractors that rely on myself and my colleagues within my company to get out there and document all the damages within these properties. Yes, I think that really sums it all up. It's just I'm going to be inundated with work. So please don't freak out if you reach out to me thinking I'm ignoring you or thinking that I've got too many other fun things going on. I'm probably just super busy with work. So let's close this out. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Share this video to anyone else that you think can benefit from this. And as always, I'll be on YouTube. So